Open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for today. We pray that you'll bless our time together and help us to always remember that you are in control of a world that seems to be falling apart. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm calling today Falling Apart. And I did a live stream with Tom Hughes of 412 Church on the Hope for Our Times app on Wednesday, if you want to go look for that. We just answered some questions. We just didn't cover anything specific, but as I was talking to Tom before we started, I just said, it seems like everywhere I look, things are just sort of falling apart and jamming up everywhere. So I have fewer slides today than any update I have done in years. That I have some notes here that I might talk about. And I might have time for a couple questions if you want to indicate that in the chat on YouTube in all caps. I'll try to answer a couple, but we'll see how we do on time. It's one of those Sundays where I think I just could get up here and I can talk about the convergence of all these things that we see, the acceleration of everything happening, because it seems like the world, I think it's a fair statement, that the world is a good bit of turmoil. And I think a lot about this verse here about, when we see these things happening, we need to have a framework that these things are going to happen. So we know that there's the Olivet discourses in Luke and Matthew 24. We know there's things in Revelation. We know there's things through the Gospels. We know there's things through the Old Testament prophets. And it's sometimes a little bit difficult to piece it all together. But as I was thinking about it this week, when the Antichrist goes into the temple and reveals himself, that's like a really big marker that's being laid down. And we need to be ready for things like that. For example, I don't have a specific temple update. The Temple Institute has come out and updated on the red heifer. First hour, I talked about the trial of Jesus. And as I was researching that in the Sanhedrin, I found out that 11 years ago, the Temple Institute, almost 12 years ago, released blueprints for a new Sanhedrin chamber that would be built on the Temple Mount as part of the temple. And so at some point that's going to be there. And it's going to be significant. But I personally think that the Antichrist is not revealed, and it's not dead certain who it is until he goes and does the abomination that makes desolate. And Jesus tells us, look, when you see that which was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and that's kind of an indicator. Look, when you want to understand what's going on, well, go to Daniel and just start looking through Daniel and read all those prophecies there, because they're important. Jesus himself said that they were. So we want to be part of these people who understand. So here it is, falling apart. I'm not falling apart. The world is. And so we look at these economist covers, not because they're prophetic, but they are put out by people who have a lot of influence in the world, and they sort of indicate the things that are important. And so you see Biden, you see a ship down at the bottom, there's supply chains, you see technology, you see oil, you see war, you see weapons, that sort of thing. And then you see robots up at the top, AI. And I'll talk a little bit about that. This is a cover from a recent Foreign Affairs, their centennial issue put out by the Council on Foreign Relations, The Age of Uncertainty. And you see the guy there in the dark with a light trying to find his way. And I always find it very interesting, the imagery that's used a lot of times in these things. So let's look at a few things. We'll look at a couple cultural things that I might tie into some other things, and then we'll go through. And I'll try to remember. So, and like I said, if I have time at the end, I'll maybe answer a couple questions. And if I don't think that your question wasn't worthy of being answered. I just decided I'd talked long enough. So this is interesting. That I worked at a large law firm for many years, the last 20 years, a law firm that was in the top 200 in size in the United States. And I can tell you that as a conservative, evangelical Christian, things changed over the last 20 years. Really changed. I dropped my membership. I used to be a member of the American Bar Association. It was not too long after I went to the ABA convention in San Francisco in 1992, which was during the 1992 election. And they were all excited. They were giving out awards that day. One was going to Hillary Clinton and one was going to Anita Hill. So I decided that would be a good day. I told my partner, who was out there with me, I'm taking the van and I'm going to play golf because I'm not going to listen to this garbage. And so I did. But this is interesting. Hogan Lovells is a large, prestigious law firm. And I'm just going to read a little bit from this article because it's written by a lady who was a longtime partner there. She's one of the most respected lawyers in her field, business restructuring and insolvency. It's a highly technical area. So she's a heavy hitter. And listen to what she said. After the Supreme Court issued its Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade in June, global law firm Hogan Lovells organized an online conference call for female employees. Now I'm thinking well, that's kind of sexist, right? Just females? This is what happens in the woke thing. You get a certain number of points that allow you to participate in these things. So as a Caucasian male, I think I have about 0 points on the wokeness scale or victimhood scale. So I just don't get to participate in anything if they don't want. This is, by the way, this is happening all over the place. I've seen, we have, forget where it was, a major university. Saw a gal interviewed on Fox the other night, and she said, well, if you're a white person, you don't get to come to where there's minorities unless you can't accompany a friend who's a minority to a meeting or a coffee shop unless you get permission from the group, if you're white. Now that sounds a little bit like racism to me. And this is where it goes. But so listen to what Robin Keller wrote in the Wall Street Journal the other day. As a retired equity partner still actively serving clients, so she's still working for the firm, but she's retired. I was invited to participate in what was billed as a safe space for women at the firm to discuss the decision. It might have been a safe space for some, but it wasn't safe for me. Everyone else who spoke on the call was unanimous in her anger and outrage about Dobbs. I spoke up to offer a different view. I noted that many jurists and commentators believed Roe had been wrongly decided. I said that the court was right to remand the issue to the states. I added that I thought abortion rights advocates had brought much of the pushback against Roe on themselves by pushing for extreme policies. I referred to numerous reports of disproportionately high rates of abortion in the Black community, which some have called a form of genocide. I said I thought this was tragic. And I think I pointed out to you, I played a clip from MSNBC a few weeks ago on Morning Joe with Mika, and she's there. Here are the heads of the major pro-abortion organizations, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and I think Emily's List. And they're all Black women. And I thought, this realizes Margaret Sanger's dream of eugenics in a very special way. And if I said that in the law firm I used to work at, I would have gotten the same treatment, I think, that Robin Keller got. Listen what happened to her. The outrage was immediate. The next speaker called me a racist and demanded that I leave the meeting. Other participants said they lost their ability to breathe on hearing my comments. After more of the same, I hung up. Someone made a formal complaint to the firm. Later that day, Hogan Lovells suspended my suspended my contracts, cut off my contact with clients, removed me from email and document systems, and emailed all U.S. personnel saying that a forum participant had made anti-black comments and was suspended pending an investigation. The firm also released a statement to the legal website above the law bemoaning the devastating impact my views had on participants in the forum, most of whom were lawyers participating in a call convened expressly for the purpose of discussing a controversial legal and political topic. Someone leaked my name to the press. I filed my own complaint with the firm's general counsel office, alleging that the firm and those who had attacked me on the call had violated the company's anti-harassment policy by publicly labeling me a racist. Hogan Lovells hired another law firm to conduct an outside investigation. 3 weeks later, I received a letter stating that the firm had concluded that my reference to comments labeling black abortion rates genocide was a violation of the anti-harassment policy. This is insanity. By the way, if you're a big, important business person, don't hire Hogan Lovells. You know why? Because they're all Romans 1 morons. They've lost the ability to reason. They canceled her. Never mind that this view had been expressed by numerous mainstream commentators, black and white, including in these pages. My complaint was dismissed. My contracts with the firm were terminated, and other firms, wary of the publicity, blackballed me, all after an unblemished 44-year career. The response of the rabidly anti-Dobbs participants on the call wasn't surprising. What was shocking, at least to me, was how eagerly Hogan Lovells kowtowed to a woke faction inside its workforce. Several women on the call, as well as male lawyers at the firm, contacted me later to offer private support for my right to express my views. Those former colleagues must now realize that they are in a hostile work environment. If this could happen to me, anyone who expresses a disfavored opinion, even on a matter of law, can expect the same treatment, immediate cancellation without concern for client interest, due process, or fairness. Bravo, Robin Keller. I appreciate that she had the courage to step up. She has nothing to lose. Her career, she's semi-retired, but they don't care about her clients. I mean, she's a great lawyer. You don't make equity partner at a firm like that unless you're a great lawyer. But look at how people think about that. The aforementioned Hillary Clinton speaking this week at a women's conference organized by her daughter, who now is known as Dr. Chelsea Clinton. And Hillary speaking about the Dobbs decision. Listen to what she said in response to a question from a doctor on a panel she did with her daughter.
This is an indictment of our healthcare system, and it's an indictment of our failure to provide equitable access. But it's mostly, as Vicki said, so shocking to think that in any way we're related to poor Afghanistan and Sudan. But as an advanced economy, as we allegedly are, on this measure, we unfortunately are rightly put with them.
So listen, I thank the Lord that she never became president of the United States. She is the perfect example of they will accuse you of being everything that they are. This is how the left operates. Here's an article also out of Arkansas, weighing legality of Arkansas ban on care for transgender youth. This is a big issue in our culture today. Drag queen story hours, the sexualization of children. It's so easy to see, but then they accuse you of being the Taliban if you oppose it. And so this case was brought by a young man, I guess, who wants to transition. And they filed a lawsuit in Arkansas. The judge hasn't said when he will rule. There are also cases making their way to the Supreme Court. There's a Marriage Act that is to recognize marriages from other states. And you're going to see it. It's passed the Senate. It's going to go to the House. It's probably going to be approved. There was an attempt to put in amendments to protect religious liberty, and that was denied. And you know what's going to happen with this. This is going to be used as a weapon against churches, Christian colleges, bakers like Jack Phillips. And then there's a case also at the Supreme Court right now where a web designer, they wanted him to make up a pro-gay website. And he said, no, I can't do that. It's against my conscience. And they're suing him. And they're going to sue him into oblivion, just like they did Jack Phillips, just like they did a couple that owned the bakery or wedding business out in Oregon. They're going to cancel them. They don't care. It's one of these things where it gets me upset, and it's almost hard to kind of form the words to talk about it without getting really mad and angry, because but it's indicative of the times in which we live. I mean, when we talk about it will be as it was in the days of Noah and Lot. I think that there's a lot more to that than just saying that, things are going to be kind of bad or people are going to just be acting normally. I think we're going to be seeing some really bad manifestations of things. I don't have any pictures. I don't know that I would even show them if I had them. I saw Good Fight Ministries, Chad Davidson, Joe Schimmel did a thing on this Spanish company, Balenciaga or whatever that's called, that does this. They have the little kids with sexual bondage items and toy bears dressed in bondage clothing. And then if you zoom in on there's a stack of papers, and it's a Supreme Court decision that sort of allowed certain aspects of child pornography to go forward. So it's clear the message that they sent. And I think Kim Kardashian was involved with this. I don't know if Kanye West was or not, I shouldn't say. But now now Balenciaga is about and say, oh, well, this was just, we don't understand how this happened. You don't do an ad campaign and put out all these publications and everything because some photographer acted on his own. There's a whole corporate approval process. And there is this sexualization of children thing going on that's very troubling. And so it's hard. You got to protect your kids and your grandkids, whatever, in this day and age. So this is an article from last week's Economist, Frozen Out, How the World is Leaving Europe Behind. And the article, Europe Faces an Enduring Crisis of Energy and Geopolitics. This is kind of interesting, the way geopolitics goes. I talk about acceleration. Things change very quickly. I'll talk about China in just a moment. But remember, it was just a few weeks ago, China had this big meeting of the Chinese Communist Party, and they elected Xi to another 5-year term, and now China's in turmoil. They have elections in a large country south of the equator. In this hemisphere, don't think I can say it because they're banning channels that say anything about it. So they had an election. There are certain things under the Constitution of that country that need to be done that aren't being done. People are protesting. The largest pro-democracy demonstrations in human history are taking place in this country right now. Millions of people in the streets protesting the election. They put in place a leftist. He had been convicted. He wasn't able to run, but the Supreme Court, most of which were people that the majority of which he had appointed, overturned his conviction. One judge did. So he got to run, and he won the election, amazingly. Isn't that amazing? And so now there's a question about, legal challenges, but what happened there, remember what happened up in Canada with the truckers? People who are protesting have had their bank accounts shut off. You go against us, we will erase you. And so it all seems like it's falling apart. And so Germany or Europe is the same way. I can remember for a lot of years, look at Europe. It's in ascent. It's growing. It's great. It's going to be so powerful. Now they're questioning about whether the lights are going to stay on. The headlines in the Iranian newspapers this morning are talking about, like the Tehran Times, are talking about pointing out that in the UK, they're eating pet food to save money, and they're heating food on the radiator pipes. Because this has been reported, and so the Iranians don't like the UK, so they're picking it up. Here's an article. This is an article from Switzerland, a German article. It says this: Switzerland is considering driving bans on electric cars. Now, wait a minute. I thought the electric car was going to save us. It's a joke. It's about control. It has nothing to do with saving the climate. I mean, you can look at what goes into making one of those cars and the cost and all this other stuff, and it just doesn't work. There's nothing that replaces hydrocarbon BTU production of gas, oil, gasoline. It just doesn't. Listen to what this article says. Switzerland could be the first country to impose driving bans on e-cars in an emergency to ensure energy security. By the way, a lot of electricity in Switzerland comes from hydropower. But even in our country, we're having trouble with hydropower. Lake Powell, Glen Canyon Dam is a big energy producer, but they're concerned that next summer they will have to shut off the turbines. If they don't get the levels in the lake rise, that they'll have to shut off the intake turbines for the power that make electricity. And they call it a whirlpool effect. And it's way down. And that's a huge dam. I think that dam is taller than a 50-story building. It's a huge, huge dam. So several media, this is from the German Spiegel magazine, several media report this unanimously and refer to a draft regulation on restriction and bans on the use of electrical energy. Specifically, the paper says the private use of electric cars is only permitted for absolutely necessary journeys. Professional practice, shopping, visiting the doctor, attending religious events, attending court appointments. A stricter speed limit is also planned on highways. So have fun driving your Porsche at 25 miles per hour, your electric Porsche. Here's another article. How realistic is a blackout? Germany's top civil protection officer warns of power outages in winter, raising concerns. Network operators and scientists think the excitement is exaggerated. Consumers can still take precautions. In other words, you don't really need to use all that electricity, and you don't need it 24 hours a day, people. Get with the program. Here is an article from Yahoo News, Europe embarks on solar power revolution to solve its energy crisis and fight climate change. There's a massive solar boom in Europe, says Matthew Berwin, agrivoltaics project manager at Germany's Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy Systems, the largest applied research institute for solar energy in Europe. It's huge. But some people have raised questions about it. Some, including former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss, are concerned about solar installations on land that could be farmed. This fall, the government of the United Kingdom even briefly flirted with an effective ban on solar farms based on concerns about arable lands and food security. In places where they don't have unlimited land, that's a big issue. You're gonna eat, or you're gonna have solar that gives you power a few hours a day, maybe. Have you been to the UK in the winter? We were there 4 years ago this time of year. If it's cloudy, it's pitch black at 1:30 in the afternoon. When it's pitch black, guess what? Solar power doesn't really work. And when you extend that out over a year, you have to have a backup system, but they're not building the backup systems. They're financing solar farms, but they won't finance a nuclear power plant or anything else. This article even says, what's more, solar has its limitations. Solar on its own cannot be the solution, adding that it needs to be coupled with other renewable energies like wind or hydropower as part of an integrated electricity system. And hydropower is great. But what happens when silt fills up the dam? I mean, this is happening in Pakistan. It's happening in other countries. And dams are not generally taken care of that well. Here's another article that I'm going to play a couple clips of Dave Walsh on War Room talking about energy, because I think he kind of nails it, and I think he needs to be heard. But he refers to an article here, or what's in this article. And this is what the person says. When it's very dark, when it's winter, and when it's night, solar is much less usable. Well, duh. Really? You figured that out all by yourself? This is a politician in making right here who ever said that. Much less usable? How about, zero is much less usable. So here's Dave Walsh.
Well, in Europe, if you want the lights out 7,700 hours a year, and the year is 8,760 hours, yeah, it's realistic. But who wants that? I mean, this article conflates and badly misstates the reality of this incredibly. Because as they devote more and more to solar, more investment in more solar capacity, that the reciprocal of that, the other 7,700 hours a year that you need electricity, will be furnished by natural gas. This builds a monstrous added codependency on natural gas, an effort to do this. And that's because, for example, in Germany, the solar value is about 3.7 hours a day. Take over here in Arizona, it's about 9. In Florida, it's about 6. Average in the U.S. is about 5.5 hours a day. In Germany, 3.5 hours a day. So the total available time, if you put solar panels across the whole country and Austria, you'd have 1,030 hours covered with electricity, and then the other 7,700 hours not covered with no electricity. That's how unrealistic this is. Because once again, it doesn't work at night. There's a comment in the article about solar working much less at night. It doesn't work at night. It doesn't work after 4 p.m. At this time of the year, about 3:30 p.m., it's over. It starts at 10 a.m., it's over at 3:30 p.m. as far as any effective usefulness. The second thing, the cost of this. I mean, the big beneficiary of this process, I hate to say this, many of our European brethren in the UK, particularly online here, they're going to suffer at the expense of Americans. How so? The exports of LNG will double to triple with this kind of process of possibly them doubling or tripling their solar farms, because, again, the reciprocal of all the time that it's not operating, which is 7/8 of the time, they're going to have natural gas running a background parallel system to have electricity, have the lights on.
Here's some more.
They have spent Europe 770 billion to date on subsidies for renewables since 2008, and look what that's gotten them. So we're talking now about doubling that in an era of no more free money, no more zero interest rates, with massive more public debt to finance a double down of this, of maybe another 800 billion of subsidies on additional renewables that simply only support a part of the time. And I'll give you another example of this. The article mentioned, well, when the sun's not out, we have the wind and we have the hydro. Two things with that. Wind tends to blow during the day, about 40% more effective due to a concept called diurnal surface heating. Sunlight warms the surface very unevenly. Wind tends to be much more dominant during the day when you have solar power. Hydro is for places like Canada, where you've got low density population, a lot of rivers where you can actually do more dam building. Europe, like the 48 states here, we're done with dam building. You'd have to translocate 28, 30, 40 million people to dam the Mississippi, the Allegheny, the Ohio, whatever. The Danube, the Seine, the same thing. There's no more hydro to be farmed in Europe or harvested. The article mentions that as a background of yet another renewable that can be played out given the shortfall of solar. No, it's going to be gas. It's got to be gas. That's the only technology that cycles effectively behind solar. And you're talking, when you add the costs up, natural gas backup with solar is about 3.4 times the cost to individuals than natural gas by itself in combined cycle would be. With batteries, 9.4 times the cost. 9.4 times the cost. If you have battery backup for the 20 hours that you'd need to back up solar, you'd be at 9.4 times the present electricity cost there, which is already, for example, Germany, 4.5 times ours. France, we've had one reactor being built in Europe since 2007. It's still being built in Flamanville. Areva is the last company left in Europe that can build. It's French-owned, French government-owned now. Macron owns Areva, the only nuclear capacity in Europe for plant building. Siemens was in it when Merkel announced the end of nuclear power plants in Germany. They quit nuclear plant building. So we're left with Areva. They're 15 years into a project that's 10 billion euro over budget, the one reactor Europe is attempting to build. So you've got that drove the bankruptcy of EDF into Macron's hands. So he's now advocated, as you know, an era of scarcity. And let's get used to it, because this is what we want. Well, this is what's being forced by the elite governments over there. Excepting for Italy, fortunately. It's inexplicable, Steve. It's not really explicable with any rational logic.
And the other thing that Dave talks about is the fact that they're going to do this. Everybody, both sides of the aisle, politically, are on board to do this in Florida. Now, Florida has 6 hours of effective sunlight a day for solar. What are you going to do the other 18 hours? And they're just not building plants. And everybody and their brothers are moving to Florida. The whole thing is insane. Europe's complaining that we're subsidizing green energy projects under our Inflation Reduction Act, which they refer to as a Green New Deal. You never hear the politicians in our country call it what it really is, because that would, be telling the truth. Here's one more little segment of Dave Walsh.
System, the average Western European country is now about 24% dependent on intermittent renewables that are not dispatchable, meaning you can't hit the on button and know that you've got electricity, like with a combined cycle nuclear or coal plant. They're also a big importer of electricity from France, which has remaining problem in the reactors with these tube leaks being evaluated, repaired, replaced. They're still underway. So they've got an electricity shortage, and they're banning fridge use at certain times of the day, washing machines on restricted duty. These are all hard to enforce things. Nightclubs being shut early, even ski resorts being closed to conserve electricity. These measures, if you look at a couple of the largest countries, England and Germany, have both now nearly 34% of their electricity resource is non-dispatchable, meaning solar, wind, and resources that you can't hit an on button and know they're going to be there for you. Where 15 years ago, 100% of their electricity resource was dispatchable, baseload, known to be there, reliable generation. That's the big change.
I like Dave Walsh for see the golf ball rack there, and sounds like my kind of guy. It's just not working. Another thing that things are changing. Here's an article from the Times of London the other day. End of era for Christian Britain. And what you see is that Christians, and that's Christians of all kinds, are now a minority in Britain. And I saw one, I don't know if she was Pakistani or Indian, member of government, might be a member of parliament, talking about, London's lost six, and I don't care for the racial distinctions, okay? But I'm just telling you because the politicians think it's a big deal because if they get certain types of racial minorities in, they think they'll vote their way. So they're all for that. They never think of the consequences. And she said, you can find it on Twitter, that white people in London have decreased over the last, I forget what the period is, 20 years, by 600,000 people. Minorities, mostly Muslim, have increased by 1.2 million. And when we were in London a few years ago, when we came into London, somebody said, okay, we're in London now and it's time to play the game. Can you spot a real Englishman? And it's not a racial thing. You want to understand that. I could care less what somebody's race is, but it is changing the city. It's changing the country. And now on a religious basis, when we stayed a few blocks from Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, the hotel, a Marriott hotel we stayed in, had 50 TV stations. 10 of them were Arabic language. Right in the heart of London. You walk across the park is Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace, and it's changing. So Elon Musk, so that's something to look at, to follow. So here is, Elon Musk bought Twitter. He's going to restore free speech, and everybody's melting down. He's released all kinds of files about the Hunter Biden laptop and got everybody in just a complete tizzy. Happy people, on the right that says, yeah, it's about time, and people on the left saying, so what? It doesn't make any difference. Well, Hunter Biden's not president. Well, that's not the whole issue, you understand? It was a complete cover-up, and it continued. And so here they're telling him, Brussels and Yellen turn up heat on Musk over Twitter. U.S. is weighing foreign ownership review. Is he allowed to even own it? Spent billions for it, but we may not like it because he's going to allow people that might criticize us. Europe is saying he's got to follow strict content moderation rules. So what they did in Europe, if you remember from the, I talked about this a couple years ago, they had put in very restrictive rules. And they did it in France and they did it at the EU level. And so the tech companies would say, well, yeah, we're not shutting people off in the United States. We have to comply with what they're doing in Europe. So we have to shut you off if you're violating our content moderation rules because we have to comply with the European thing. And the European threat is they're going to take up to 6%. Here, the European Commission threatened him yesterday with a ban unless Twitter abides by strict content moderation rules, while U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen indicated Washington was reviewing his purchase of the social media platform. The warning from Brussels came in a video call between Musk and Thierry Breton, the EU's commissioner in charge of implementing the bloc's digital rules, according to people with knowledge of the conversation. Breton told Musk that Twitter must adhere to a checklist of rules, including ditching an arbitrary approach to reinstating banned users, pursuing disinformation aggressively, and agreeing to an extensive independent audit by the platform each year. Last sentence, Breton reiterated that Twitter could face a Europe-wide ban or fines of up to 6% of global revenue, of global turnover, if it breached the law. And they had put in place this thing. There were actually two acts. There was the Digital Markets Act, and then this one, the Digital Services Act. And look at what it says. You can see what it says right there. The regulation fully harmonizes the rules applicable to intermediary services with the objective of ensuring a safe, predictable, and trusted online environment, addressing the dissemination of illegal content online, and the societal risks that the dissemination of information or other content may generate. So here's the whole disinformation thing again. Back when that rule was being considered back in April of this year, this wonderful person who ran for president of the United States said, for too long, tech platforms have amplified disinformation and extremism with no accountability. Who made up the whole Russian hoax thing? What a liar. Listen, you couldn't give her a polygraph. She would flatline the thing. There wouldn't even be a bump. This also was this week. Nina Jankowicz, Scary Poppins, has now registered as a foreign agent. She's working for a UK company called the Center for Information Resilience. Go look it up. It's a big pro-Ukraine lobbying organization. And even though she was not allowed to take her position, remember Mayorkas said, well, we're kind of putting that on hold. They never put anything on hold. Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security, he's got to be easily the chief liar in the United States government. This guy cannot be believed on anything. It's so apparent when he gets up there and testifies in front of Congress that he's lying. So I'll talk a little bit about this. I'm going to do a, excuse me, missed my cough button. Sorry about that. I was going to do a interview, discussion this week with Olivier Melnick, who's been here a number of times, on anti-Semitism, because this is just growing, and this is going on at the World Cup. Israeli journalists at World Cup, this is the New York Times this morning, get a chilly reception from Arab fans. And so some of these Israeli journalists have thought, well, we'll just go to these Arab countries and everything will be fine. You know, we have the Abraham Accords. And what they're finding is the Arab street doesn't really like them all that much. And it's been kind of disconcerting. Some people have even been attacked that were not Jewish journalists. They're not Jewish. They're Egyptian, but people thought they were Jewish, so they went after them. In Qatar, the home of the, one of the big supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Boy, nobody could see that problem coming when they awarded them the World Cup, could they? And okay, let's talk about, by the way, let me say this about Elon Musk for a second. Well, I don't have a slide on it. They did I'll be doing something in future updates and maybe a midweek update at some point that deals with some of the things going on with Elon Musk. And we all like Elon Musk because he maybe is restoring free speech to some degree. But he's also a big transhumanist. That's very concerning. His company Neuralink had a big symposium thing, I think on Thursday. You can find it online. I've been looking through it to try to edit it down. He's been into AI and this brain chip. There's one company that beat him to market with trials with a chip that's been approved by the FDA, but it's kind of a basic chip. The one with Neuralink has tens of thousands of connectors. And this is really Revelation, mark of the beast type stuff. It's very concerning. In China, who, by the way, has provided a lot of financing for Elon Musk, as has Saudi Arabia. All very concerning things, especially with the surveillance state, digital currencies, passports for Charlie vector treatments, that sort of thing. So here's a couple articles from the Times. This one's from Tuesday. Xi fights to erase evidence of mass Charlie vector rebellion. And you can see the things that are going on in China. Millions of people in the street just a couple weeks after Xi seemed to be at the height of his power. People are protesting. But what they're doing is they're finding that their QR codes are flipping to red almost immediately when they participate in a protest. People are being warned, if you like a post on social media that is considered to be anti-government, we're coming after you. This is an article from, I think, yesterday's, this is this morning, Sunday Times, London, the Chinese digital Stasi. People here, they're saying, hey, we're figuring a way to fool artificial intelligence right now that are monitoring our posts. So in other words, they're saying Charlie Vector, 019 or something like that, which seems to work. But China is really locking people down. Now, they've seemed to relax things a little bit, but they were like welding people in their homes, locking them in their homes. And the protest came about because of apartment building that people had been locked into with locks and welding it. It caught on fire and a bunch of people burned to death, including children. And so people just got upset and they're protesting. But this is one of the things they're protesting is, this is a picture of a quarantine camp under construction right now in China. There are a number of these. Some of these are being built to house 250,000 people. And they're concerned because their state-approved treatments are not as effective, they say. And so now they're worried if they open up society, they will have a virus running rampant through the society. I've seen estimates where people think 5 million people a month could die because of the way they've approached this with the zero Charlie vector rules. Let's see, let's look at the way things change. This is an article from the Washington Post. I think it's actually front page this morning of the Washington Post. Russia and Ukraine are fighting the first full-scale drone war. And this kind of shows, when we talk about things in Bible prophecy, these wars and invasions and that type of thing, is how quickly things can change. Because sometimes you think, well, this country, they come, they're part of this invasion, but they're really not that powerful militarily. But what this is showing, that with the use of drones and low-cost drones, some of these you can pick up in at Best Buy or someplace like that, is really changing the face of warfare. And it's causing people a lot of concerns. This is reported this morning in the Times of Israel, Reuters, Jerusalem Post. Iran says it has executed four men for cooperating with Israel, being Mossad agents. Even Lapid, on his way out, he said, so this anti-Semitism thing. So let me just make a quick comment about this. I posted this on my Facebook page. There was a dinner down at Mar-a-Lago. Kanye West was there with Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is a white supremacist Jew hater. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. Kanye West has said a lot of things that fall into that category. And everybody was real excited about him a while back. They said, I think he's a Christian. And, he had the church service. But at one of them, he had Marilyn Manson, for crying out loud. So, but a lot of people, we want to be gracious. We want to say, welcome to the family of God and that type of thing. But, remember when Paul converted? Paul was like stuck away for 3.5 years of training before he did anything in public. So I think we need to be careful about latching on to people and saying, oh, look at this person, he's a Christian. And I think that, what's the guy's name? Milo Yiannopoulos, who supposedly gave up his gay lifestyle and everything. He was involved in getting Kanye there to have dinner with Trump. I'm just saying is I do not like what Kanye has said. Nick Fuentes is easy. Kanye is an anti-Semite. I don't know how else to say it. People need to come out that have been associated with him and say, I'm not part of this. And those people know who they are. You've seen them. And I think Trump needs to do it as well. I think it will be, even Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said that this needed to be done. There's a good article in Jerusalem Post today that this is by Seth Frantzman, who said anti-Semitism in the U.S. has reached a tipping point. And I think he's right. People are concerned about the way that it's going. I know I reference her a lot. Caroline Glick had on her Middle East News Hour, I think she calls it, on JNS YouTube channel. This week had Dusiami Washington, who's a black pastor in the United States, who has written about the black church and Zionism, I think is one of his books. He's excellent. I would highly recommend you follow it. Dusiami Washington, I forget what his Twitter handle is, but follow him on Twitter because he addresses the issue in very clear terms all the time. And he did a great job in his interview. But this is a problem. I mean, the anti-Semitism is growing, and it is very troubling. You're seeing a lot of attacks in Judea and Samaria, often referred to as the West Bank and Israel. I saw a video yesterday. I could play it, but some of these things I'm not sure if it'll get past the social media censors. You can find it on Twitter very easily. There was I think it was in a town north of Shiloh where the ancient temple or the tabernacle stood for almost 400 years, a town called Huwara, Huwara, or however you say it. They were trying to arrest a guy. He started reaching for the gun of the Israeli policeman. He had a knife, looked like he was trying to stab him. Then it looked like he was trying to reach for his gun, and the policeman shot him 4 times and killed him. If you ever thought, ever are taken with the notion that the world is going to correct itself without the intervention of Jesus Christ coming back and ruling and reigning, go read through a Twitter thread, like where they posted the video of that. The hatred, it's unbelievable. I mean, I see Twitter posted, who was it did a good interview on Tucker Carlson the other night? James Woods, the actor who's been reinstated to Twitter. And he said, well, I'm glad to be back on Twitter, and I'm suing these people. I'm going after them because they ruined my career. And the hatred that for people who oppose him politically, it's unbelievable. It can be very depressing to read through it. But read through a Twitter thread like that and see what people are saying. It's awful. Here's another survey. This survey came out, reported this week. 1 in 4 hiring managers say they are less likely to move forward with Jewish applicants. This is in the West. We know this is coming. And I think it's time for the church to step in and say, enough of this. We're going to stand against this. We're going to stand with Israel. I think it's prophetic. I think it's correct. And I'm telling you, I can see the hate mail coming already. So listen, not endorsing every Jewish person in the world by saying that. We can be nuanced to criticize bad Jewish people. We can be nuanced to criticize black people of any race. But by and large, what's going on with attacking Israel and everything. So this is some reports. This is a report issued. They're trying to refer Israel to the International Criminal Court because of the Palestinian journalist that was shot and killed during an IDF operation in Samaria. She got caught in the crossfire. It was investigated. Now even our FBI has come out and said they're investigating Israel for it because she was a U.S. citizen. United Nations came out this week with 5 Middle East. They call it, it's always interesting to look at the way they characterize their press releases. Adopting 5 Middle East texts, General Assembly calls for credible talks on final status issues. But it's anti-Israel stuff. They all voted. They all passed. Ukraine voted against Israel on every case on these. And this is interesting. This is an article. This is May 16th, 1948, a couple days after Israel declared itself as a nation. And it says this: Arab armies invade Palestine, reach Gaza. But the point is, and I'm going to play a little bit of the Palestinian ambassador, and I'm going to throw in a video of the Israeli ambassador who talks about this the other day when they were voting on these resolutions against Israel. And the reason it was they were voting against this on the anniversary or the day after the anniversary of the UN vote to partition Israel back in 1947. And that is known in the Arab terms as Nakba Day, the disaster, the catastrophe. But so I'm going to play a little bit of the Israeli ambassador, then of the Palestinian observer and state ambassador at the UN just before the vote, or just after. I think it was just before the vote, and then the Israeli ambassador, and then make one more comment, and then we'll be done. So here is the Palestinian ambassador.
Our people faced what would become the most protracted refugee crisis, protection crisis, justice crisis in the history of the United Nations. Mr. President, the Nakba is the destruction of entire Palestinian communities, of hundreds of towns and villages. It is the attempt to uproot a nation. It is the historical injustice that occurred 75 years ago and every day since. But while Palestine refugees were uprooted from Palestine, there was no force on earth that could uproot Palestine from their being. Refugees in their tents conceived and built one of the most consequential liberation movements on earth. Palestinians in historical Palestine, enduring systematic discrimination and military occupation, dug their roots even deeper in the land, determined to see the Nakba one day reversed, not repeated.
Okay, now I'm going to play for you I forgot to insert this in my thing, so I'm going to pull in the Israeli ambassador. I'm going to jump into the middle of it because, this is like the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, and I thought the Israeli ambassador had some very good comments. Excuse me one second here. Okay, here we go. This is the Israeli ambassador, and I apologize, I cannot remember his name.
Year after year, a package of resolutions is brought forth by the Palestinian proxies, and year after year, all of the distorted resolutions pass, ensuring that the conflict never ends. While majority here backs these biased lies, not for a moment do these member states take into account the true destruction that they are propagating. When you support one-sided resolutions, you are not helping the Palestinian people. You are merely turning this institution and yourselves into accomplices in the Palestinian jihad war to destroy any chance for reconciliation. This conflict, like any conflict, can be solved in one way and one way only, with both sides sitting down at the negotiating table and, surprise, surprise, both sides making mutual concessions. Yet, every time any peace proposal has ever been placed on the table, and you all remember that, the Palestinians reject it outright. Refugees, I would like to recall the historical facts behind this false Nakba and remind you of the true Nakba. On November 29, 1947, exactly 75 years ago yesterday, this General Assembly, this body, voted to adopt Resolution 181, the partition plan. With this resolution, the international community lent its support for establishing a Jewish state alongside an Arab state. My people, the Jewish people, accepted this resolution without hesitation, but the Arabs and the Palestinians did not. 5 Arab armies, together with the Arabs living in Israel, tried to destroy and annihilate us. But it didn't end only at trying to decimate the nascent state. 2 days after Israel's establishment, this was the headline in the New York Times. I know you can't read it, so I'll read it for you. It didn't read Arabs in grave danger in all Jewish lands. It read Jews in grave danger in all Muslim lands. The Arab countries and Iran immediately began to expel the Jews living throughout the Middle East and North Africa. Over the years, hundreds of thousands of Jewish families were uprooted from their homes, robbed of their valuables and property, and forcefully cast out of the countries where they lived for millennia. These Jewish communities did not revolt against the international community's decision. They did not try to annihilate another people. Their only crime was being Jewish. This is the true Nakba. This is the disaster carried out against the Jewish people. And this is the disaster that this body has ignored for decades. Look at this family that was expelled. Stop ignoring the Jewish Nakba. Stop ignoring the Jewish Nakba. Colleagues, it is insane enough that the very same side that started the violence requests your support for distorting history.
And he's right. This is something that's done every year, but it just, right now, it seems to get worse and worse. A great article in Israel Hayom today, Caressing the Palestinian Reluctance, talking about this decision of the UN General Assembly. On the right is a tweet by a lady named Vicky Fairman. I have no idea who she is. I came across it, but I wish I could put it up, but can I just read it? It'll take about 5 minutes. She goes through the history of Israel. Before Israel, there was a British mandate, not a Palestinian state. Before the British mandate, there was an Ottoman Empire, not a Palestinian state. Before the Ottoman Empire, there was the Islamic state of the Mamluks of Egypt, not a Palestinian state. Before the Islamic state of the Mamluks of Egypt, there was the Ayyubid Arab Kurdish Empire, not a Palestinian state. Before the Ayyubid Empire, there was the Frankish and Christian Kingdom of Jerusalem, not a Palestinian state. Before the Kingdom of Jerusalem, there was the Umayyad and Fatimid empires, not a Palestinian state. Before the Umayyad and Fatimid empires, there was the Byzantine Empire, not a Palestinian state. Before the Byzantine Empire, there was the Sassanids, not a Palestinian state. Before the Sassanid Empire, there was the Byzantine Empire, not a Palestinian state. Before the Byzantine Empire, there was the Roman Empire. Before the Roman Empire, there was the Hasmonean state, not a Palestinian state. Before the Hasmonean state, there was the Seleucid, not a Palestinian state. Before the Seleucid, there was the Empire of Alexander the Great, not a Palestinian state. Before the Empire of Alexander the Great, there was the Persian Empire. Before the Persian, there was the Babylonian. Before the Babylonian were the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, not a Palestinian state. Before the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, there was the kingdom of Israel, not a Palestinian state. Before the kingdom of Israel, there was the theocracy of the 12 tribes of Israel, not a Palestinian state. Before the theocracy of the 12 tribes, there was an agglomeration of independent Canaanite city kingdoms, not a Palestinian state. Actually, in this piece of land, there has been everything except a Palestinian state. She's exactly right. I mean, that's a great history lesson. Just a prayer request. My wife's still suffering from cold, flu, sinus infection. This has been going on for a month. Just pray that she gets over that. And also, I will be traveling to Israel later this week, and pray that that all goes smoothly. Pray for safety and that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not nervous about going there, but there's a lot of unrest right now. I mean, they're really, things are a bit tense in certain areas. So pray for that, and pray that we'll have a good conference meetings, and then I have a few days to tour around a little bit. So pray for that, and remember that all these things, this is what was prophesied. Learn how to respond. Learn how to use this information. I talked about this at the end of the sermon I did first hour, if you want to look at that. We're at this time where the things going on in the world fitting into the prophetic outline of the scripture can be used as a witness. I have no doubt in my mind. Like last Sunday, somebody wrote and said, somebody listened to your update, they're now a Christian. Now, I don't know how that happens, folks. I really don't. That's a God thing, and I'm not saying it to brag or anything like that. I'm amazed that it happens. And so we live at this time where it's really important that you stand as a witness for Jesus Christ, wherever you are, because you have a lot of information, as we talked about first hour. And as we see things unfold, I think this is going to be a great time to be a witness for the Lord. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for your prophetic word, that we can understand the times that we live in. And we pray that you will help us to use that information to be an effective witness to everyone in the world and to the Jewish people. And we pray, Lord, that you will use that information to your glory. And bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.